Welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to start a Geode Validator node. We go to geodechain.com and click on Setting Up a Validator Node. On this page, we'll be able to download the official Validator package, which has everything you need. But first, let's talk about how you need a dedicated computer, either Mac OS or Linux. Ubuntu works great. Any flavor of Debian will work great. Generally might avoid CentOS and that flavor of Linux. It can be a standalone machine sitting in your home, or it can be a virtual machine on a cloud provider, AWS, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean, or pick your favorite one. Make sure that they are okay with blockchain and crypto running on their servers. Just check their documentation and be sure. Then we're going to download the package. That'll be a zip file. You'll download that. And inside the folder, you can see all of the geode code, the raw spec file, which makes sure you connect to the right network, and instructions depending on the operating system that you're going to be starting this node on. For today's demo, we will use Mac OS. And the instructions are largely the same for each operating system, with the exception of installing the extra little support packages that you need. So in those instructions, there's quite a bit to it, but we're just going to take it one step at a time. No one step is all that difficult. You're going to want to open up a terminal. If you're not familiar with the terminal application, on Mac, it's just in the applications folder. Scroll down. It's going to be in the hiding in that utilities folder there towards the bottom. Just look for terminal, and that will pull up a CLI window or a command line interface terminal for you. Now, before we get started, we want to take that geode code folder out of the package. Take it outside of that zip folder that you downloaded. Put it somewhere where you'll know how to find it, like on the desktop or in the main user folder. Now, back in the instructions, we're going to copy each of those command lines and just paste it into the terminal and hit enter. The first thing we're doing is installing Rust up and Rust. We're going to type it in there. We're going to hit enter, and then Rust up update, and then Rust C -- version is going to tell you what version of Rust you're running. We are running 1.68 on this particular Mac. And then we're going to need some support software. We're going to be using Homebrew because we're on a Mac. If you're on a Linux standalone or a Linux VM, then you are just going to be using commands like sudo apt install, and you can see those in your instruction sets for Linux standalone or Linux virtual machine. So once you have Homebrew, make sure you have that installed. Then you're going to install each of these support pieces of software, and Homebrew is going to handle that for you. So our commands look a lot like brew, install, different packages. And you're going to go down this whole list, just copying each command, pasting it into the CLI, and hitting enter. And just one at a time, be patient with it, let Homebrew do its thing, or in the case of Linux, let apt do its thing and install these packages for you. And you can do every single one: NTP, protobuf compiler. You want to default to Rust up nightly. We're going to put in WASM support and nightly tool chains, and then each one of those along the way, because the compiler is going to need all of these pieces in order to compile the code. Now, we've already decided where to put our code folder. If you haven't at this point, make that choice now. Make sure you pull that geode code folder out of the folder that it came in. Put it somewhere where you know where it is. It's really important that you are in the geode folder for this next step. Previously, it didn't matter where you were. Now it's important that you're in the geode folder. So in your terminal, you're going to navigate to that folder. If you've not done this before, you can use ls to list the folders and the files where you are so you can tell where you are. We're in the main user folder. So I can navigate to desktop where my Geode folder is. In Mac, you do not have to capitalize it. It is not case sensitive, but if you're on Linux, it is case sensitive and you will need to capitalize the D in desktop if it's capital. So that takes us to the desktop. We can list again to see what's there. We see our Geode folder is there. So then we will cd to change directory to the Geode folder and make sure that we spell it correctly. There we are. So now we're in the Geode folder. We can do ls again to list out what's there, and we see our file so we know we are in the right folder. Now that we're in the Geode folder, we are ready to compile, and we're going to use the cargo build -- release command to do this build, to do this compile. So you'll just paste that in there and you'll hit enter and you will take a break because it's going to take 20 to 30 minutes to compile. When you're done compiling, then you're going to go make your keys. So still inside your Geode folder, you're going to use the first command to make your babe key, and you're using a tool called subkey that compiled along with your code. Choose a password for your babe key. And this is you're choosing, it's not pre-made, this is your choice. You're telling it what you want the password to be. And when you click enter, it's going to give you a large set of information here. So your babe key consists of actually several pieces of information here, and this is very important that you keep track of all of this. Don't lose it, but don't keep it on your device. Don't keep it on your laptop, on your phone. Don't do that. Keep it somewhere safe, especially your 12-word phrase, your secret phrase, and your password. Incredibly important. If you lose that, no one can help you. No one can get that back for you. So be safe about it, but don't keep it on your device. Now, your secret phrase is also known as your URI, and your secret seed there, which is in the form of a hex, you know that because it starts as 0x and then alphanumerics. Your secret seed is also known as the SURI or SURI. So that 12-word phrase is a URI and the secret seed is a SURI or SURI. Next thing we're going to do is make the grandpa key. To make the grandpa key, we're going to pull this command that's actually inspecting the babe key from a different perspective, and that's why the command looks like key inspect. So we're going to grab that command, and when we do that, it's going to ask us for the URI and the password, that is the secret phrase and the password from the babe key, and this is tying them together. They are already related. So again, the secret seed is also known as the SURI, and the 12-word phrase is also known as the URI. So let's make our grandpa key. We're going to grab that command right there. Again, we're just actually inspecting the babe key from a different perspective. So when I click enter, it's going to ask me for the URI of the babe key. So I go and I grab that 12-word phrase, all 12 words, put that in there. Then it's going to ask me for the password that I had put in for the babe key. Put that in there. And it will produce my grandpa data here. So this is my grandpa key. Again, that entire set of information is very important and needs to be kept safe. And you'll notice they look identical except for the public key, the SS58 address. Those are different between babe and grandpa, but the secret seed or SURI is exactly the same between them. The secret phrase or URI is exactly the same between them. Everything else is the same about them except for their public keys. And again, we're going to keep that somewhere safe. So the next thing we're going to go do is make 2 coin accounts, 2 wallets, 2 geode coin accounts, whatever you want to call it. Now, babe and grandpa keys, those don't hold coins. Those aren't wallets. They're not accounts. They are cryptographic keys for consensus and finality. But what we're making here are actually accounts that are going to hold coin. And you'll notice it's the same command that we entered to make the babe key. Indeed it is. So I'll pick a new password. The first account I'm going to make is my stash. I need 2 accounts, a stash and a controller. So the first one I'm going to make, well, I'm just going to say this one's going to be my stash. Again, I'm going to copy all that information. I'm going to have chosen a nice strong password for it. And I'm going to keep that somewhere incredibly safe. Now, the public key is perfectly public, like it says public. You can hand that to anyone. You can post it online. You're perfectly safe to do so. And in fact, if you're a part of any kind of validator incentive program, that stash public key is the one that you're going to want to use, and that will come in important later. Again, keep this information very safe and do not keep it on your machine, especially the secret phrase and the password. If you want to keep your public key handy on your device, there's no harm in that. So then we need to make a second account to be our controller account. Your controller account is what's actually going to link your node to the chain. I can choose any password I want for this account. You can use the same one as for your stash, although I wouldn't. It's not good security. I would choose a different one. So I now have 4 things. I have a babe key, grandpa key, a stash account, and a controller account. So I want to, again, say it with me now, don't keep these on your device. Keep them somewhere safe. Write them by hand, although make sure you don't make any mistakes. Print it out and then delete it off your device, or put it on a password protected or otherwise encrypted thumb drive. Whatever's the right answer for you. So now we're going to put our keys, which is the babe and the grandpa key, into the key store, which really means we're going to put the keys into a folder within the Geode folder. You'll see what I mean by that in a minute. So we want to take the secret seed, which is the same for both the babe and the grandpa, and you're going to want to copy that secret seed or Surrey over into this patch of code that we're going to use to insert the key into the key store. Now there's 2 things you need to replace here. The first thing is the name. You can name your validator anything you want, have fun, absolutely anything. Make sure there are no spaces in that name because this is going to become a folder name. So you can use underscores, but you can name your node anything you want to, but it needs to be consistent. So that name that you give your node has to carry through to inserting the grandpa key and has to carry through to your startup code for when you actually start up your node. So make sure you've gotten that right all the way through. The Surrey is the secret seed. So we're going to copy the secret seed there and then copy it into our code blurb. So we'll just copy it in there, and I might just adjust this name to something incredibly boring like my name. So now I'll use this code to put the babe key into the key store. So still in my terminal here, I'm going to just paste that code. And you would be in the main Geode folder, your main Geode folder. And I hit enter. It's going to ask me for the password. I give it the password that I had created for my babe key. And when I hit enter, it looks like nothing happened, but plenty happened, so don't worry about it. Then I'm going to go and copy that Surrey, put it in there, make sure I've got the name right, copy that code, and put that code into the terminal window. To put the grandpa key into the key store, it asks me for the password. I put in the password and it acts like nothing happened. So the way that you'll know that something happened is in your Geode folder now is a new folder called whatever you named your node. We named our node my name. So there's a folder there now with that name. And if we explore down into that folder, you'll see that there's a chain folder in there. Keep going. The Geode mainnet, awesome, keep going. There's your key store, and if we look in there, we see 2 keys. That's your babe and your grandpa key that did indeed get inserted correctly into the key store, even though the terminal window acts, it doesn't tell you that it's doing anything, but sure enough, there it is. Back to the instructions, it's time to start our validator node in validator mode. You can start it in dev mode, that's a thing. We're going to go ahead and start in validator mode, but now before we do need to update the name here. Make sure this is, again, the same name. It's all got to have the same name. It doesn't matter what it is, anything you want, have fun, but make sure it matches. And so in here in this code, we've got a couple of interesting things to look at. Take a look at these port numbers. These are just kind of standard port numbers for the WebSocket port, for the RPC port, and for that first one that just says port 30333 is your peer-to-peer port. Now, if you're going to be running 2 nodes on the same machine, that is on the same Mac in your house, on the same standalone Linux machine, wherever it happens to be, or on the same virtual machine, then you need to update those port numbers so on the second node, because you don't want 2 nodes using the same ports on the same machine. So if you have a second node on the same machine, just increment those ports just by 1, 30334, 9956, 9946. And keep track of that. You've also got the boot node in here that is an RPC node in the network that you will be syncing with and getting all of your sort of catch-up data with, just to bring you on board. So we're going to copy that code, we put it into the terminal, and we hit enter. It will ask us for the password. This is the same as the babe grandpa password. And at this point, you will start with a wonderful display of node data as it starts up. And give it a little time. It's got to find its peers. It's got to start syncing all of that data. Give it a little time to do that. So meanwhile, while the node gets up and running, we're going to go add our accounts and get ready. So we want to go to this URL. Now, getgeode.com is where the user interface, one copy, which could be one of many copies of the interface is being served. But because we're distributed, because we're decentralized, you have to point that user face at the WebSocket port of one of the nodes. In this case, your node that you just started. So that's why it looks like RPC equals WebSocket. Now, 127.0.0.1 means locally on that machine. 9955 was the WebSocket port that you had put in your startup code. Now, if you used a different port up there, then use the right port down here. You want to match that. So we just copy that. Go get Chrome. You can use Firefox. I really recommend Chrome for this. And you're going to use that URL to pull up the Geode portal, which is now going to be pointed at your node. This one is pointed at Citrine, which is an RPC node that's there just to serve the public and to serve anyone, really, whether you have a node or not. But it's incredibly important that your Chrome browser is pointed at your node for this next step, not pointed at Citrine. So that URL with your local WebSocket port 9955 is incredibly important, because the next thing we're going to go do is add our accounts. do a rotate keys and bond our validator. So whatever your WebSocket port was, that's the number you want on the end of that URL to make sure you're pointed at your node. And the UI is going to look a little funny while your node catches up with all the blocks, and that can take quite a long time depending on how long the chain has been running before your validator joined. So in the UI, just suppose that it's pointed at your particular node. You're going to go to Settings, and you are largely following the instructions for adding a new account, but with a couple of differences. So we'll talk about that. We'll go to Settings. You want to allow local in-browser account storage. You're not going to use this permanently. You're going to use this temporarily just to get your accounts loaded in. We wouldn't want to leave them in the local browser page forever. Why? Because every time you restart Chrome or you close that tab, you'd have to reintroduce your accounts again, and that's a pain. Now, we already have an account. We don't need a new account. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose the option raw seed. And then you're going to go get the raw seed for your stash account and paste it here. So go back to where you wherever you had copied and pasted that information, and you want the secret seed, also known as the raw seed or the Surrey, goes by many names. Paste that in here, and it should recognize your public key right there. And you want to check and make sure. So go back to your notes. What was the public key for your stash? And make sure that it matches. It does. So that you know you have the right account. You have to click this. I have saved my mnemonic seed safely. Then it'll let you move on. You can give your account a name. You can choose something more interesting than my new account. The password should be the password you used to create the account, not something Google thinks you should do, but actually use the password that you have used to create this account. I used a terribly weak password there. Don't do that. Use something nice and strong. And then from here, you would save that account. Because this is just a demo, I don't really want to save that, so I am going to X out of that. But pay attention to this little paragraph of text right here. When you click save, it's going to download a JSON file to your Chrome browser. It actually might try to download two. You only want the first one. You don't want the one that has a parentheses and a 1 on the end. That JSON file is what you're going to use to then load this account into the extension. Again, with the JSON file, keep it safe. Don't leave it on your device. Keep a copy of it. It's incredibly important. Put it on a thumb drive. Put it in a password protected place, but don't print it out and delete it because you actually need it as a JSON file. But keep it on a thumb drive somewhere off of your device. So in the extension, we're going to back up, restore from a JSON file, drag that file there, and restore it. Now your account is going to be in the extension. Why? And we mentioned this in the how to get an account video as well. Accounts that are in the extension are stored in the extension on your device so that when you restart Chrome, restart your computer, close out tabs, you're not going to have to re-enter your account over and over. But if you want access to that account on a different device, you will have to backup restore from JSON on your Chrome browser with that extension on the other device. This is your local storage. There is no centralized storage for this. Again, if you lose track of all your information for your account, nobody can help you, so keep it safe. Okay, so as our node at this point is continuing to catch up on its blocks and continuing to sync, we're going to get ready to bond and validate. Now, you want to wait to actually do this until your node has caught up completely, otherwise it won't let you. We are going to go to Developer, RPC calls, choose author, which is usually the first thing chosen, but just in case it's not, and rotate keys. Now, we are in this URL tied into Citrine. Don't do this tied into Citrine. Make sure in your URL you are tied into your node. It should say that 127.0.0.1.9955. So you're doing that, and you would submit the RPC call, which would give you a hex that looks a lot like a Surrey. It looks a lot like a secret seed. It starts out 0x. It looks a lot like that. These are all hexes, so that's what the rotate keys hex will look like. And you're going to copy that because you're going to need it in the next step where we actually bond and validate. So we go to network, staking, accounts, and add a validator. And in this step, you want to choose your stash account. And let's just pick one here. For demonstration purposes, we will just grab that, grab a controller account, and it's going to fuss at me because you need absolutely separate stash and controller accounts for every node. But let's suppose that it wasn't fussing at you because you had not done that. This is just for demonstration. And then you're going to, so for every node, you've got a babe, grandpa keys, a stash, and a controller. So you want a small amount of money in your controller, a small amount of geode coin in your controller, and the majority of your coin in the stash account, because that's what's going to be, that's where you're going to do your actual bonding and staking. Don't bond all of it. Don't bond everything that's in your stash account. You want to leave yourself some wiggle room in that stash account for things like voting, for using the apps, for putting in treasury proposals. So you want kind of the larger chunk of your stake in the stash account, but you want a little bit in the controller account, which is more publicly exposed and is what is actually tying your stash to the validator to the chain. So you'll choose how much you want to bond here. On-chain bonding is 28 days, and it will take 28 days to unbond if you want to do that later. And then you'll choose where you want your rewards to be deposited. They can go to your stash account. This is what most people do. This is the most recommended. It increases your stake. That increases your voting power. But if you do prefer, you could send it to your controller account, or you could send it to some other third account if you want to. Send it anywhere you like. Now, when you would click that next button, which we're not going to do just for the demo, but that next page is where you would paste that rotate keys hex that you had copied. You'll paste that, you'll set your commission, you get to decide whatever commission you want, 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, 100%. Now, if you pick 100%, then your nominators get nothing, and they're not going to like you very much socially. Most people pick somewhere between 1% and 5%. More than 5% is considered a bit rude. So now when we go to network staking overview, there's a button here called waiting, which will show you all of the validators that are now waiting, including yours, waiting to get into the validator set. You do have to wait to the end, or basically the start of the next era. An era is 24 hours in Geode, approximately 1 day. And approximately 24 hours, we say that because it's actually a set number of blocks. If there's enough space in the validator set, of which here is currently 30, then you'll go right in there in the next era. If there are more than 30 validators total in the set, then it's more of a competition and will then depend on stake and nominations and things like that. This is a great point in time to let other people know that you've just activated a validator. It's up for nomination. Let people know that you're there. Let all of the nominators go put a word in on the Discord in the nominator lounge and let people know that you exist so that you can get nominations. You don't have to have nominations. If your self stake is big enough, you don't need nominations at all, but it makes a difference in the algorithm when it's determining who's going to get into that validator set for the next session to make blocks. So at this point, your validator node is all set up and ready to start making blocks as soon as it is selected into the validator set. Welcome to the Geode blockchain. If you have any questions, want to see more tech details, go to geochain.com.